It is the 5th century AD, and northern Italy no longer resembles the stable part of the Roman Empire it had been not so long ago. After the weakening of central authority, this region gradually turns into a space where barbarian tribes arrive, destroying cities and undermining what remains of the old system. Against this backdrop, the people of the Northeast begin searching for ways to protect themselves. Faced with constant invasions, they choose the Venetian lagoon, one of the few places that offers refuge since its islands, sticky mud, and dense reeds make it extremely difficult for large armies to move through. This is how Venice is born. The first settlements are temporary. People occupy the more stable patches of land and build light huts from wood and reeds, treating this place as a refuge rather than a place for permanent life. However, these temporary huts prove short-lived, quickly deteriorating under constant moisture and remaining vulnerable to fires. At the same time, the population grows, and with it the demand for space, which in the lagoon was extremely limited from the very beginning, as the usable land was scattered and scarce. This is when the locals develop a unique construction method: deep foundations. Venetians begin driving wooden piles 4 to 8 meters long into the mud until they reach the clay layer beneath the lagoon. The piles are placed as densely as possible, forming a solid base. In this way, they transfer the load onto denser layers while simultaneously compacting the mud itself, turning it into a more stable structure. The scale of this work is enormous. We are talking about millions of piles, mostly made from oak, larch, or pine. The wood is transported by rivers and sea from northern Italy, Istria, Dalmatia, and Slovenia, turning construction into a complex supply system. On top of the piles, horizontal wooden beams are laid. They connect individual piles, turning them into a single structure. The beams distribute the load evenly and ensure the stability of the entire construction. Only after this does stone come into use. Limestone slabs, most often Istrian stone, are placed on top of the wooden platform, a material resistant to salt water and known for its density. This layer creates a solid base and makes it possible to build heavy structures such as palaces, churches, and towers. At first glance, the entire system seems paradoxical, since its foundation, wood, is usually considered a short-lived material. However, in the conditions of the lagoon, it behaves completely differently. The piles exist in an environment almost entirely deprived of oxygen, which stops the process of decay, while the constant contact with mineral-rich water gradually makes the wood denser and harder. As a result, an inverted forest forms beneath the city, an underwater structure that becomes more stable over time and supports the buildings above. The construction of the buildings themselves also adapts to the lagoon's conditions. The main structural material is brick since it is lighter than stone. At the same time, the lower parts of buildings that come into contact with water are faced with Istrian limestone, which does not absorb moisture and is resistant to salt water. Walls are built using alternating masonry techniques, allowing for a more even distribution of weight, and the buildings themselves are designed so that the main load-bearing elements are positioned along the sides rather than the facade, reducing pressure. At the same time, facades can appear massive but are often relatively light in structure. As for residential buildings, flat ceilings supported by wooden beams are used, helping to compensate for ground movement. Distinctive chimneys are built to reduce the risk of fires in the densely populated city. Vertical expansion, including multi-story buildings, is used to accommodate a growing population while preserving the city's compact size. Once the pile construction method proves effective, Venice begins to expand. Initially, the 118 islands remain separate, but as the population grows to 170,000 people, Bridges begin to appear between them, first simple ones that can be built quickly, and later more durable stone bridges. At the same time, the canal system develops. Over time, the canals are deepened, turning into a carefully designed network of waterways. They serve multiple functions: transporting people and goods, regulating water flow, and reducing pressure on the ground by dividing the built environment into separate sections. Another major challenge is fresh water. Despite being surrounded by water, it is not suitable for drinking, so Venetians create an artificial system for collecting and filtering rainwater. Beneath almost every square, a deep pit is dug, its base sealed with a layer of clay to prevent saltwater intrusion, while the space is filled with layers of sand and stone that act as a natural filter. The surface of the square is slightly sloped, and water from roofs and surrounding areas is directed towards special openings through which it flows into the system. At the center stands a well, through which the filtered water is collected. Over time, more than 5,000 of these systems are built, providing a stable supply of fresh water. Waste disposal becomes another critical challenge, and here Venice once again uses the nature of its environment. In the early stages, waste simply flows into the canals, while tides twice a day partially clean the water, carrying pollution out into the lagoon. Later, the system becomes more advanced, and special tunnels are built beneath the streets, connecting houses to the canals and allowing wastewater to be directed more efficiently. These tunnels operate on a settling principle. Solid particles sink, while liquids gradually flow into the canals, where the tidal cycle takes over once again. And it is precisely thanks to these solutions that the city begins to rise in importance. Venice finds itself at the crossroads of trade routes between Europe and the East, and gradually transforms into a maritime power controlling a significant share of trade. In this way, the people who came here seeking refuge turned an unstable lagoon into a city that should not have existed, yet has endured for more than 1,600 years.